All around the world, people are tuned into our social media all day, every day, just watching us interview.
Let's talk about, you mentioned the childhood vaccine studies.
Yeah.
And last week, you spoke at a press conference that HHS...
Parent after parent. My baby died after flu shot. My teenage star athlete daughter or son has been paralyzed ever since they got the Gardasil HPV. One of my really good friends is the head of infectious disease at Henry Ford Health, which is one of the greatest research institutes in the world. I said, would you ever do a study that compared the health outcomes of vaccinated children with completely unvaccinated children? All the other scientists have had their careers taken away because they asked or dared to do a study like this. And he said, yeah, I would do that study. So 4 years later, I get handed the study, right? So I'm looking at these insane numbers. It's about 19,000 kids in the study. I think it's the most damning study we've ever seen, because most of these kids were like 4 or 5 years old. And I'm like, these are the sickest generation we've ever seen in this country. For some reason, the immune system of our children has gone haywire and is attacking cells in their own bodies. 6 times the rate of neurodevelopmental disorders and 6 times autoimmune disease compared to the unvaccinated. It's 6 times. They are now trying to censor us. They're censoring all of Europe, England. I have a cease and desist letter from Henry Ford Health. They're threatening defamations. They're arresting people for X posts just stating their opinion. If I do not control what is injected into my body and the bodies of my children, I am definitely not a free citizen. I have no rights as a human being. I now share the same rights as farm animals, and that cannot be. We cannot allow that to be.
This is important. This is about freedom. This is about medical freedom. This is about our children. This is about the next generation. This is about everything that matters right here. Are you pro-vax, anti-vax? Whatever you are, man, you're going to want to hear this show before you make an opinion. And why haven't they ever compared unvaccinated kids to vaccinated kids? Well, my next guest asked that question and right now has one of the hottest documentaries out there. It is going viral. You have to hear this information before you make an opinion. But let me back up, because he is an Emmy award-winning producer of The Doctors. Remember The Doctors? Okay, people don't realize he got his start there. And he also was the producer of an incredible vaccine documentary called VAXXED, which, man, I put that out there. I was a big proponent of that, and like I am of this new one. But all that said, and you have so much more to say about this guest of mine, Del Bigtree, thank you for being here.
Dan, thanks for having me.
Man, there's so much more to say. I mean, you've done so many things. Your new show, I mean, High Wire, it's not new, really. I mean, you've been doing this a lot, but 75 million downloads on this show, I think, right?
Yeah, it's I mean, it's been an incredible ride since the moment I left CBS and The Doctors and made VAXXED. It's like I like to say I went out for a surf lesson and accidentally caught a 60-foot wave. Yeah. And I've just been figuring out how to hold on ever since.
Look, this new, that's a good way to put it. I've watched your career do that, actually. Yeah. But, this new documentary we're going to talk about, because I've said that. Why don't we, instead of having anti-vaxxers and vaxxers, come on, let's just do a study comparing vaccinated children and unvaccinated children. Yeah. And there's the truth lies in there somewhere. Well, what you're going to hear in a minute is you challenge somebody to do that. One of the top scientists, top research hospitals, Henry Ford, and they did that study. Wait till you hear more about that. But I want to back up a little bit, because I think it deserves some of this. There was a time where you produced The Doctors, Emmy award-winning producer of The Doctors, and you were pro-vax.
No, I wouldn't say I was pro-vax.
Okay.
The show was pro-vaccine.
Okay, all right.
The truth is I grew up with chiropractors. My parents were like very sort of health conscious hippies. So when I ended up on the Doctor's television show, my mom would call and say, what are you doing working on a medical talk show? You didn't go to doctors, you went to chiropractors. And so, but I'll say this was interesting about working on it is I really being around it for years and years, like doing science and medicine. I was challenging the system, talking about, stories like Cleveland Clinic's just brought in chiropractic, or here's a surgeon that's using, acupuncture instead of anesthesia. And especially when there'd be stories about like a drug that was being recalled, I would jump all over that saying, look at how many lives this destroyed before someone realized, that there was a problem. Or Monsanto's glyphosate was ruled probably carcinogenic to human beings back in 2015, which is like the second highest cancer rating there is. I reached out to Monsanto and said, do you want to defend your product? And had a huge show about that. And I brought in a GMO activist to debate their head of toxicology. All that to say, I've always just challenged, the system. Wherever there's billions of dollars to be made, I tend to think they're not really looking out for our best interests. And so, but I did get into the vaccine conversation, which I hadn't touched. I wasn't vaccinated as a kid, but imagine like your kids or chiropractors' kids, you don't really think about it. It's just sort of how you're raised and you're just doing your own thing. We knew we were kind of just like, we were doing it differently. But then when I stumbled onto the whistleblower at the CDC, Dr. William Thompson, and ended up making a documentary, VAXXED, which you mentioned.
The tagline was "Cover Up to
From Cover Up to Catastrophe," which is really about the autism conversation. It was a study in the CDC that looked at the MMR vaccine, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, and autism. And Dr. William Thompson, a scientist right in the CDC. In fact, their top epidemiologist was the one that just started singing like a bird in these interviews saying, we destroyed statistically significant information. We cut the study. They committed fraud. Like they saw a correlation between that vaccine and autism and tried and ultimately hide it, hid it from the public. So that film catapulted me into this vaccine conversation, mostly because once you do a story like that really calls out the pharmaceutical industry, calls out the CDC, you're not really going to work in television again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You pretty much hung yourself, if you will, chasing this this thing that like, okay, man, I'm in now. You're all in. Yeah. What did VAXXED do? Okay. So after VAXXED, it was a big stir, but again, it probably was put aside and then people kind of went back to their lives. What kind of happened after VAXXED? What doors did it open, close? Well, what impact did it have?
I think a lot of people will credit VAXXED with igniting the medical freedom movement. Which now I think has got a new evolution with Robert Kennedy Jr. Maha.
Yeah.
But it was an international sensation. We traveled the country for a year. We got kicked out of Tribeca Film Festival just right out of the gate, which gave us the most amazing amount of negative press you've ever seen.
Yeah, that was a benefit.
Baby killers and, you name it, most dangerous film ever made. Probably at that moment, one of the most, controversial documentaries in history. Yeah. But it was like Passion of the Christ. You'd show up to a theater and there'd just be a line down the block, all the controversy everywhere we went for an entire year. Every time we were pulling into town, the local, media or the medical university nearby would start taking out headlines and calling us, all sorts of names. And on occasion, there'd be bomb threats in theaters. It was just crazy. But because of it, we, ended up really being able to impact the conversation for over a year. And then internationally, the same thing was happening. So at the end of that year, I wanted to get deeper into it. We were, one of the things I did, like the second screening when there's a line down the block, it was like an art house theater in New York after we'd been kicked out of Tribeca Film Festival. And I was like, I wonder who these people are. Like who comes out of their way to watch a movie like this? And so we were doing Q&As after every screening. And so I just stood up at the beginning of the Q&A and said, would everyone with a vaccine injured child please stand up? And 3/4 of the audience stood up. I mean, I was shocked. I knew we were making a movie about an issue. I thought it was a very small issue. Some of these kids are having this autism side effect, but then, most of the room stands up. And so I ended up asking that question 3 or 4 screenings a day, 5 days a week for an entire year. And everywhere we went, the same numbers. It was just mind-blowing that it was this big an issue and no one was talking about it. No one, and if you did talk about it, you were ridiculed, you were attacked. News reporters would just call you crazy and a heretic. And so that led me to decide I wanted to get deeper into, because after the screenings, we would go out and people say, I want to tell my story too. So we were rolling live on Periscope and Facebook, which are two miracles, by the way. This ability to broadcast live over your cell phone appeared like right at the moment we were on tour. So we turned it into a traveling reality show. So all around the world, people are tuned into our social media all day, every day, just watching us interview parent after parent. But it wasn't just autism, and it wasn't just the MMR vaccine. We were having every single vaccine was implicated in some form of an injury. My baby died after a flu shot. My, teenage star athlete daughter or son has been paralyzed ever since they got the Gardasil HPV vaccine. And so when people would walk up to me after the film, they kept asking me the same question. Look, your film's just about the MMR vaccine and autism, but what about all the other 16 vaccines we're giving our children in 72 doses? And I would say, look, I only have anecdotal stories. I can tell you there's not a single vaccine that does not appear to have injured somebody. Yeah. But I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know what the data is.
Right, that's acknowledged. I mean, so people, we have a lot of people who are pro-vaccine watching this. So it's acknowledged that vaccines cause these injuries. To what degree, we don't know necessarily, but it does. Now, the argument then is always, yes, but look with the lives that they save. So the risk is better than, outweighs the benefit outweighs the risk.
Yeah.
So what do you say about that?
I would say you would need science to prove that. And there's only one type of study that can actually get to the bottom of that, mathematical equation. And that is, you have to do a double-blind, placebo-based trial. It's what we do with every single pharmaceutical product.
That's the only thing that actually shows
cause. If you want to get to causation, this thing does cause this, or this thing does cure this, or all of these things.
Right. You have to do.
This that has limited injury or no injury or no side effects.
Right. So the question then is why hasn't there ever been a double-blind placebo trial study done on any vaccination? Because those watching, well, of course there is. No, there isn't.
No,
there's not one. Okay, so it's absolutely not been done. Why?
Well, I think that that's a really good question. And it's, if you think about it, a safety trial, which is what this is, meaning one group gets a product.
And by the way, every drug has to do this.
Every drug.
So this is the only drug that doesn't have to have this.
We will make you, if you're dying of, if you got stage 4 cancer and you're like, I want to try that cancer drug that's in that trial right now. It's in a multi-year safety trial. I'm going to die anyway. Nothing else has worked. I'd like to try that drug. We go, no, safety is so important. You're going to have to wait till this 5 to 10 year trial's over, where they're going to finally see, did more people die in the placebo group or in the trial group? But when it comes to perfectly healthy children not dying of cancer, we will rush a product right to you without any testing. Everyone watched this during COVID. Like we watched this happen during COVID. So, and one of the things that's shocking, and it woke up a lot of scientists and doctors like Dr. Peter McCullough's the leading heart authority in the world. But ultimately, when they watched it rushed out, they started saying, well, look, the childhood vaccine program is great, but the COVID vaccine was just rushed on the market. And I went to Peter and everybody that like him. I don't mean to single him out. He's done amazing work. But I would say that COVID vaccine is the best tested vaccine we've ever made. Like, that's ridiculous.
People
that
are
can't
like,
be.
what?
I was like, no, I'm telling you, that had a saline placebo in it. Mostly because my nonprofit sued the FDA and said, if you don't use a saline placebo, we're going to tell the world you didn't do a safety study. So they actually, right after we submitted that threat, 3 days later, they stopped the trials down and then turned the placebo into a saline placebo. It was going to be a meningococcal vaccine. But anyway, never done a placebo trial. Why? I think because when vaccines first came along, you think about smallpox and polio, there was this idea that it was like, let's try this new thing. people are dying of smallpox. And so they just kind of rush it out. Edward Jenner discovers, look at the cowpox pus, the milkmaids aren't getting smallpox. Like maybe cowpox is like a lighter version of it in it, and that's how it starts. It starts cutting people's arms open and slapping cow pus in there. People don't know vaccine comes from vacca, which means cow. It all stems from this, discovery, but they rush it out. Like, why have a placebo trial? People are dying. Polio, people are getting paralyzed. Why have and I think we just got used to everything around the word vaccines. Let's just treat it as though everything's an emergency, and we just don't have time to do placebo trials. That's a guess.
Yeah, that's a guess.
I don't know.
I would argue on my side is like, well, why would they want to risk a bad result when right now they don't have to do the study? It's the only drug, by the way, where you don't have to do a double-blind study to prove safety. So
it's the only drug, by the way, has no liability either.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So even if they rushed it on the market, you can't sue them, so that doesn't matter.
Every other
it doesn't
drug,
matter if it kills you or hurts you or
injure
injures
me
you.
or my child, I can sue the drug company, but not with this.
Right.
That makes it the cash cow. Why would I do a study? And also they say, well, this is what they say. If you do a study, there's an ethics problem, because now we have something that prevents something, and we have a placebo group. That's not ethical, so we can't do the study.
Right. If you have a measles vaccine, you can't do a trial of a new measles vaccine with a saline placebo, because those kids are now being denied access to a product that would protect them from measles.
But we do it for cancer patients. We do it for every other thing.
We do it for so many. We literally let people die of cancer.
So I call BS on that.
Group.
Yeah. So,
I know.
But anyway, all right. Yeah. So the fact is, we probably blew a lot of people's minds right there. The fact that, we think these are very studied, they're not, which when we look at the autism statistics, kind of go over that for people, because you said every time, 3/4 of the crowd is raising their hand. Okay. So that means that these statistics have gotten worse. We can't argue this.
Well, they do, but let's point out that they do argue this. And this is why I want to really, if you're going to start really making a transition in your life, if you catch a person lies to you, if you catch someone you work with is lying to you, or your boss lies to you, then you got to chalk that down to, okay, I just caught them in a lie. So I want to catch, because everyone has heard this statement. Now the statement made by most people's doctors with autism, and certainly the scientific professionals, even journalists on the news, they'll say, actually, it's not, autism isn't increasing. We're just diagnosing it better.
That's right.
Autism's always been here. We're just getting better at diagnosing it. So let's just take that thought for a minute, okay? We are currently at 1 in 34 children is being diagnosed with autism on a national level. Boys, it's more prevalent, so it could be 1 in 18 to 1 in 20 boys. In California right now, they have the worst rate we've ever seen. They're currently at 1 in 12.5 4-year-olds, and you haven't diagnosed everyone until they're 8, so that's going to drop probably below 10. So we're talking, let's just take that. Let's say 1 in 12.5, because it shouldn't be, if it's always been here and we're just diagnosing it better than the California stat, it shouldn't be different. Like somehow eventually around the country we're going to realize it's 1 in 12.5 boys if this is true.
Right.
But now let's just think about this. 1 in 12.5 boys, so that means 1 in 12.5 men. And we should be seeing hieroglyphics with drawings with that prevalence level. 1 in 12.5 boys. Why, when we all went to the movie theater to watch Rain Man, was that such a hit? It was such a hit because none of us had ever seen this character before. We're just like, wow, this is unique. Yeah. What a weird problem.
In my class, there was no autism. Not one.
None.
In the whole school, there wasn't.
Right. So we were like, so the movie's a hit because it's something you'd never seen. I guarantee you would have seen it if it was 1 in 12.5.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And then when you look at all of the diagnostic, manuals that have been drawn up by the guys like Charcot and Tourette's and Freud, these guys went into insane asylums, and our best descriptions of schizophrenia and all the psychological issues that are out there were done over 100 years ago.
Absolutely.
Of these guys that would go into insane asylums and say, look, draw up these perfect descriptions. Not one description, from any of those guys of autism, repetitive motion disorders, super OCD with seizures and, can't speak, nonverbal, doesn't exist. And then lastly, I think Bobby Kennedy makes the best point. Where are the guys my age with autism? It should be filling 1 in 12.5. So every 12 elderly men in an old folks home right now should have autism. I mean, they're standing in the corner, they can't speak, they're in a diaper, never been,
There's none.
There's none. There's none. So then when you hear that being said by the American Academy of Pediatrics or the AMA, you got to say, why would they lie about something like that? And if they're lying about that, then now you're probably also saying, and they were lying about the efficacy of the COVID vaccine, saying it's 95% effective, didn't stop any from getting transmission. In fact, we now know people that got 5, 6, 9 vaccines had COVID 9 times.
Yeah.
Right. So once you keep seeing an industry that was selling you on an idea that vaccines are safe and effective, like that was it. We never did admit that there was injury. In fact, if you ever said, I know a kid that think they got seizures, from no, that's ridiculous. That doesn't happen. Really, because it's written in the warning label. So is encephalitis, swelling of the brain. So is paralysis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, transverse myelitis. So when they say they cured paralytic diseases, no, actually, and I'm in the movie, an inconvenient study, you see one of the kids I interviewed paralyzed from the neck down by a vaccine. And so, in the end, once you start looking into this, you realize there's a whole lot of lies that have taken place. And then how do we know? How do we know that this vaccine is actually, less dangerous than disease? Measles, for instance, measles vaccine, before we ever had a measles vaccine, the death rate from measles in America was 1 in 500,000 people. I mean, that is a 0.000 something.
Before there was ever a vaccine.
Before there's ever a vaccine. And so, again, another lie. When the media says deadly measles, I mean, I literally get accused of causing measles outbreaks. They love to walk up to me. Reporters will say, you're responsible for the measles outbreak in Texas, the measles outbreak in New York. I was like, if you keep saying it, you're going to give me delusions of grandeur, like I'm some sort of God or something. But they'll say deadly. And I'll say, that's interesting. How are you able to say that to me? How are you asking me this question? Like, what do you mean? I was like, measles is deadly, right? It's like the most infectious disease we've ever seen. If it's around and you haven't been vaccinated or you haven't caught it before, you're catching it, right? Yeah, that's right. Okay, how are you standing here asking me this question? Like, what do you mean? I was like, well, we can assume that everybody's grandparents on the planet caught measles, right? Yeah. So how are you here? If it's deadly, how did we all survive? How's our species here? How are 8 billion people alive on this planet if it was deadly? And then lastly, why is it a Brady Bunch episode back in the early 1960s where everyone in the Brady Bunch family gets the measles and there's a laugh track every time another kid comes home? Mom, I got the measles too.
Yeah.
Laugh track.
Yeah.
Last, I think the last laugh is all the kids are done. They're like, you can't beat the measles. We get to stay home and play, board games. And then I think dad gets the measles or something.
Yeah, listen, I grew up in the 70s. We went down. I remember the Sosters had the measles and we went down to play with them. Of course, it was the same with chicken pox. Just out. Mumps. They're saying more people with mumps, with the vaccine are vaccinated.
They've known
right?
This has been going on. I mean, so this product's a disaster.
Yeah,
it's a disaster. You're filled with all sorts of non-truths. And what happened? When did the television now make measles dead? There's 2 questions. Is measles more deadly than it ever was before? That's a question. Mm-hmm. Is the vaccine not working? Is there a reason we're still getting measles outbreaks? But lastly, when did we start calling it deadly when it used to be something we laughed about? What changed? I would say what changed is your television set is essentially owned by Pharma. It's 50 to 70% of the advertising, which means your news anchor works for the pharmaceutical industry.
Well, and I would also argue, too, that by giving a vaccine, we're stopping, because it gives a temporary immunity, we're stopping a child getting measles, as our example right now, when they should get it.
Yes.
But the problem is if you get it later, now it does become more deadly. And I could make that argument for many of these childhood diseases that literally, there's a vulnerability point where a kid's meant to get these. And by the way, I make the argument, I've done a deep dive into this. I believe that these childhood diseases make us stronger later in life, prevent cancer, prevent autoimmune. I believe it's actually healthy to get them, and we're trying to prevent them. Most people don't see it that way. Most people think of the one in whatever million it is that dies because of some type of immune problem.
Well, let's take the numbers on measles for a second. With that 1 in 500,000, these are the original CDC, before it was a CDC, the Vital Statistics of America, 1960. 1 in 500,000. The overall, they believed about 430. I think it's like 430 people died from measles in 1960, before there's a vaccine.
430.
Right? 430. Now, to your point, there's been great studies that show that an adult man who had measles, not the vaccine, but had the infection as a child, reduces their rate of heart disease and heart attack by at least 10%. I don't forget what the rate is this year, but it might be nearly 1 million people are going to die from heart disease, heart attacks. If you could reduce that by 10%, that's 100,000 people's lives were saved from having the measles, but with the vaccine protected us from 400 people dying. So right there,
makes no sense.
It doesn't actually, the risk-benefit ratio is way out of whack. Women who get measles and mumps, these are big, huge, multi-million people studies that get both measles and mumps, reduce their risk of ovarian cancer by 50%. That's tens of thousands of people die from that every year. Right there, you beat any issue you had with mumps and measles that was a risk.
So most people hearing this never heard that argument.
They've never heard that. Right. But think about it. Whether or not you believe in divine design and God or evolution, we've been living with viruses and bacteria all around us. In fact, there's arguments that there's virus DNA in your own DNA. It's part of this, our adaptation of living on this planet, this living, breathing organism we're a part of. And somehow we've decided we're just going to interject with our mad genius to stop measles. Why? What's the point?
Yeah.
So anyway, there's a lot. You could do weeks and weeks of shows about that. I know you have.
Yeah, no, exactly. We go down every vaccine. Here's the big one everyone's going to say. We hear it all the time. What about polio, Del?
Yeah. So polio vaccine has killed millions of people who got cancer from the simian retrovirus that was in it. This is a known fact that whether it was like contaminated in a lab, it was there. The polio vaccine itself caused polio in people that got it back in the original version of it. It
spiked all the cases.
And it caused outbreaks of polio. And there's huge questions. A great book, if anyone ever wants to get into it, by Suzanne Humphries, called Dissolving Illusions. I'm not going to really try to get into that. But what's weird about polio is, where was it? We can see it in pygmy tribes. We see it in the blood system of humanity for centuries. And then suddenly, 1900s, 1950, you have these spikes where suddenly we have a major problem with it. Why? And then, I think you could look at environmental toxins that we're causing, but I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole. I would say this, even if polio, and by the way, 1%, less than 1% had the paralysis that we all know about. 99% never even really had, they were asymptomatic. Wasn't a major issue at all. Of that 1%, only a fraction of them would be permanently paralyzed. It would go away. And then a smaller fraction even still would die. So again, the numbers are much lower than we're told. But whatever the case, let's say polio was a dangerous issue. Clean, sewage and better hygiene and antibiotics. There's so many things we have now that we didn't when these diseases were around. But even so, we always knew they had side effects. We always knew it caused polio. We knew it caused paralysis. We knew it caused cancer. But we were willing to take on that risk, the vaccine, correct. The question is chickenpox the same as polio? Should we be taking on the same risks that we did because of, that we did with the polio vaccine? Are we giving too many vaccines at one time? Have we ever studied giving 10 vaccines to, in fact, there's the first SIDS case just paid out this last week. They've just proven in a court that a baby's SIDS was caused. They died 5 hours after getting 10 vaccines at 11 months old. I mean, why are we giving 10 vaccines to an 11-month-old baby? I mean, it just defies
even Trump said, why are we taking 5 at once? Why do we spread it out? It makes more sense. I mean, he's right. It's like, it's not making an argument for vaccines or not. He's saying stacking these doesn't make sense.
No.
Right? It doesn't. And that's what we're doing in this country.
Well, and let me bring up the last, I think the biggest, because what we've proven, I've sued the government. That's what my nonprofit does. We've sued one against FDA, NIH, CDC, Health and Human Services. No placebo trials were ever done. So you never established the product is safe. You never established that it doesn't cause more harm than good. Or vice versa. Then when you want to do a study now, as you point out, well, can we test it now? Because there's lots and lots of kids lined up with injuries, and you're saying the vaccines aren't causing it, but you won't let us do a placebo-based study now because it's unethical. But the last thing they'll say is we don't have to do a study because we've already got, over 50 to 100 years, depending on what vaccine you're looking at, using it, and it's been proven out that it's safe. I was like, really? Because in the same time you've increased that vaccine program, in the 1980s, we got 10 vaccines. We had a 12.8% chronic disease rate in our children, either a neurological disorder or an autoimmune disease. Now, today, we have about 54% of our kids, more than 1 in 2, has a chronic disease, either a neurological disorder or an autoimmune disease. So you're saying that the results, I should look at the health of children as proof that they're safe. And I'm like, these are the sickest generation we've ever seen in this country.
Right.
It's the sickest nation of children in the entire industrialized world. Then they'll say, well, you can't blame that on vaccines. I say, you just used their health as your proof that you don't have to do a safety study. And what is their big issue? Autoimmune disease, immune system dysregulation. For some reason, the immune system of our children has gone haywire and is attacking cells in their own bodies.
Huge problem. That's why the gut problems. That's
gut
why
problem,
all of it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, people say, Del, how do you know it's not the fluoride in our water or the pesticides and herbicides on our crops or the plastics or the forever chemicals and, on and on. Hormones in our beef. Let's look at all of those things. My nonprofit investigates all those things. But if it's about our immune systems going haywire and being confused,
that's different.
Shouldn't we look closest at the one product that's designed to alter your immune system for life? Because that's what a vaccine's doing. If you ask someone what does it do? Well, it tricks I get a little bit of a virus that's kind of killed or something. It tricks my immune system into thinking I've had a disease. Okay, well, we're not tricking your immune system 1 time or 10 times or 20 times
again,
or 50 times.
Every booster. As a matter of fact,
we're rocking your immune system. All of a sudden, it's gone haywire. It's like, could it possibly be the vaccines? What are you talking? What else could it possibly be?
And people need to understand this. I think they can understand it. When you get a childhood illness that we're talking about, it stimulates a type 1 autoimmune or type 1 reaction, immune reaction, and that gives you lifetime immunity.
Yes.
But when you get a vaccine,
go through that again.
Absolutely.
The one time.
So that's a certain type of immune reaction. Yeah. When you get a vaccine in the boosters, you're stimulating a type 2, which is an emergency type of reaction, antibody reaction. That's how we can measure your antibodies up, because that gives you that temporary immunity that we're saying is making our children healthier. The problem is if you stimulate the emergency response in the immune system, this is where the autoimmune is coming from. So that kind of brings full circle. Okay, so we can't convince them to do double-blind studies. They're making the argument that we're making kids healthier. Okay, great. So then let's look at a cohort study and let's compare them, because if their argument is right, that we don't need double-blind studies because we're making kids healthier, right? And we have all this proof. Well, great. Let's look at it. Let's compare the vaccinated to the unvaccinated. Yeah. That's what you said. Yeah. Tell that story, because this now is your next documentary that just got released. It's an inconvenient study that finally was done. Yeah. And it is really inconvenient.
It's really inconvenient.
Let's take it all the way back, because that's kind of the argument that you made and you knew that it had to be done by one of the top, otherwise they're going to slam it and criticize it.
Look, if you or I did this study, they'd be like, come on, you had a bias. And in fact, this study has been done about 5 or 6 times, in a homeschool study done by a guy named Dr. Anthony Mawson, in a pediatric clinic by a guy named Dr. Paul Thomas. But every time they do the study, they go, well, they had a bias. They had a bias. And they just write it off. But every time this study's been done so far, the vaccinated are coming out a lot sicker. So in 2016, when I was traveling the country with VAXXED, I was going up through Michigan, and somebody contacted me. I don't know how they got my number. They said, look, one of my really good friends is the head of infectious disease at Henry Ford Health, which is one of the greatest research institutes in the world. Would you like to maybe meet for dinner? I said, sure, that'd be fantastic.
And by the way, I want people to know that they are known. Like if a study comes out of Henry Ford, it's gold.
It's gold. I mean, this is one of the best of the best. And so I met this guy. His name was Dr. Marcus Zervos. We sat down to dinner, and he actually surprised me. When he sat down to dinner, the first thing he said is, I watched your film, which was already huge. A lot of doctors were like...
He watched VAXXED.
Yeah, he watched VAXXED at that time, 2016. He's like, it's very compelling.
Now, this guy's pro vaccine.
He said, I am pro vaccine. Before we say anything, don't get your hopes up. He said, I am the reason we have a mandated vaccine program at Henry Ford Health. You'll even hear in the movie, because I have part of the movie is some hidden cameras I had that in another dinner I went to, but we'll get to that in a second. But he's sitting at this dinner and he said, but you've been saying something as you're traveling the country. I've been watching these YouTube videos of you that I found very offensive. You keep saying that they've never done the proper studies to establish safety in any of the childhood vaccines. He's like, I'm hugely pro-vaccine. I also sit on all the biggest databases in the world. So I went to go get you that evidence so I could bring it to you. And he said, I am shocked that I have to sit across from you and tell you you're right. I cannot believe, actually, that we've never done a single placebo-based trial.
He thought there was, like most people think.
Like every doctor. Like when people say, so the doctors are all in on it, they're poisoning me on purpose. No, they are told this has been done. They believe their education. Their education told them this has been tested extensively. Just like Sanjay Gupta says on TV, there's mountains of evidence that have researched this. Absolutely not true.
Mm-hmm. But he believes it.
Until he looked into it. But then he said to me, look, that doesn't mean vaccines aren't safe. It just means we can't say that they're safe. I was like, well, that's all I'm saying. I think that's an important point, though. I mean, exactly. I think everyone assumes you proved they were safe.
Take these vaccines. Right. But we can't say they're safe.
Right. We're pretty sure they're safe. We're assuming they're safe.
But we don't know.
We don't know.
Would you still give that vaccine to your child? Right. That's a really good question.
Yeah, imagine a cancer drug.
Yeah.
We're pretty sure it's safe. We didn't test for it, but we got a good feeling inside. Okay. And by the way, we're going to make $100 billion on it. But don't let that, look like a conflict of interest. So anyway, he said, I don't know what I can do for you. I'm pro-vaccine. I said, well, hold on. You do like big studies for Henry Ford, right? You use the databases, all that. You're one of the preeminent scientists of the world on health and infectious diseases. Yeah. I said, would you ever do a study that compared the health outcomes of vaccinated children with completely unvaccinated children? Because I think that would end this conversation forever. Since I think vaccines are dangerous, you think they're safe. The only way we're going to get over this, which is now starting to tear this country apart, why don't you just compare these two groups of children and see who's healthier? And he said, yeah, I would do that study.
What did you feel in that moment?
I was blown away, first of all. And it's I was
I would be like, I have to run to the bathroom because I might have just shit myself.
No, totally. I was like, wow, is that? And then I felt obligated to tell him, like, look, other people have like gone in this area, never like you and never this institution. But if it turns out the way I think it would, it can be really devastating to your career.
But he didn't believe it. There's a chance that it would.
I don't know. He didn't say that. What he said to me is, I don't care about things like that. I follow the data where it leads me. And besides, I'm near retirement age.
But for him to say that, he believed it was going to come out.
Royal flush in his hand and he's going to win this.
He believed he had a royal flush.
He does. He's like, whatever, I'll tell this guy I'm going to bluff him a little bit. Like, stay, show. So he ended up, I kept the relationship going. It took till about 2020. So 4 years later, he finally got the study finished. And we only had one rule about it. Like, whatever whatever it ends up showing, and you've stated how pro-vaccine you are, so I'm pretty sure you've got whatever biases you can bring to this thing, you're covered, but whatever you find, publish it. It's like, absolutely. So then he gets it done in 2020, doesn't publish it. Like, he's refusing to publish. In fact, won't get on a phone for some time, many, many months. I'm like, Dr. Servos, what's going on?
Were you at all nervous, though, that because so much depended on this, his reputation, the hospital, everything, that they would fudge the numbers in the end? Did that cross your mind?
I'll tell you why that's never been my concern. And because after that, meeting him, I still stood on stages. I stand on stages every time and say, the CDC just needs to do a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study, and we could get to the bottom of this. And why won't they? And people say, Del, for exactly that reason, you keep challenging the CDC to do this study, they're going to manipulate it and put something out, and then you'll really be screwed. And here's my thinking. I said, don't you think? I mean, the rise of Robert Kennedy Jr. was, I think, a PBS special out 2 weeks ago. The rise of Robert Kennedy Jr. to the most powerful position in health. No one in pharma wants him there. Certainly no one in vaccines wants him there. The success of my first movie, this movie's now gone viral. We're, tens of millions, probably moving towards 100 million views. I have debates happening in science. All of that would be shut down if you could simply produce a study that compared vaccinated to unvaccinated and show, look, the vaccinated are healthier. They have lower rates of autism, as it turns out. Yeah. They have less ADHD. So there you go. Less asthma, all of that. It would be over. And so I assumed, since Robert Kennedy Jr. had already, by the 2016, he'd already been dragged through the mud for over a decade. Andy Wakefield and all these names, and Jenny McCarthy's and Sherry Tenpenny's, and were out there. And so it can't be lost on the CDC that all we would have to do is compare vaccinated to unvaccinated and show that the vaccinated are healthier, and these people have no argument. This is over. And so, and by the way, it's exactly the type of study they do to establish safety on every other product in the world. So they know how to do this study. It's actually like the basic principle of science. So I assumed while I was sitting there, not only do I believe they've done this study, I believe they have tried to take these kids out, make this excuse, move this around. Like, they must have done that study like 1,000 different ways, because if just one of them, if there's just one way you could get out and make it look like the vaccinated are truly healthier, this would be the headline across the world, and we would be done. And if your
name's on that study, you're a hero, and you're going to be interviewed, and your career's set.
That's it. And so, no, when he said, I'll do it, I'm like, I am pretty damn sure that this problem is so bad, or I would have seen 1, 10, 20 of these studies. This is the easiest way to end the entire anti-vaccine argument. So sure enough, 2020, he's not publishing it. I keep calling him. Finally, by 2022, I'm getting a little pissed off.
Because it's a long time.
It's a long time. 2 years. Like, come on, man, you promised, I was like, let's get dinner. He's like, all right, come out for dinner. Let's talk.
He must have liked you.
He did.
Because why would he go to dinner?
No, I mean, and that's, I want to make that point too, because a lot of times on our side of this conversation, we'll attack doctors or be mean to reporters or people that disagree with us. I never approach things that way. Like, I know he's a good person. Yeah. I see people as being good people. I know you believe, I think you're saving children's lives. I got to treat you that way.
There's something about him you liked as well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, also, he had just been the scientist in the middle of the Flint, Michigan water crisis. So he went against the health department and said, you're poisoning the underserved
so you
community
sensed
here.
He had an honest heart. He just believed that the vaccines were absolutely doing good, but you sensed that.
Probably did not realize how deep the orthodoxy was around this. I'm sure once the study, look, this is all speculation. I have a cease and desist letter from Henry Ford Health. They're threatening defamation. So let me be really careful to say, this is all my opinion. I'm not in there. I don't work there. I can only go with what Zervos has said to me, what I've seen with all the other scientists that have had their careers taken away because they asked or dared to do a study like this. But ultimately, I think he probably did it, said, wow, those are really scary numbers. Let someone at Henry Ford either appear, because he's pretty high up. He doesn't really have a boss. So it's not like, I don't think someone brings the boom down on him, but there must have been just sheer terror, I'm guessing, because why not publish it? You can make a difference in the world if you do. So Anyway, I called him and said, let's get dinner. And I did something I've never really done before.
And by the way, this is in the film.
This is the heart of the film.
How do they watch the film? Tell them right now. You guys, wait till you see this. Wait till you see this. It's for free
right now. Inconvenientstudy.com. You can go there. You can watch the movie for free. You can even read the study. You can print it out. And we even publish all of the attacks from Henry Ford Health on
and say it one more
why this
time.
isn't. Inconvenientstudy.com.
Inconvenientstudy.com. Wait till you see it. So
hidden cameras,
you come in with a hidden camera to this dinner.
Me and assistant let's go to dinner.
Okay.
And I wanted to know what's in the study. You see him. I get handed the study right there at that dinner table. Hadn't seen it yet.
I know. You see that.
I've heard little. He'd alluded to there's some issues for the vaccinated.
You see him hand it to you.
Hands it to me. So I'm looking at these insane numbers. I mean, 6 times the rate of neurodevelopmental disorders.
6 times of autoimmune too,
and 6 times autoimmune disease. So like basically the cornerstone of the chronic disease epidemic of our lifetime.
Oh my God.
And vaccines, compared to the unvaccinated, it's 6 times.
By the way, arguably autoimmune is driving autism too, because the body attacks the receptor. All the stuff about the folate, right? That was the Tylenol and everything.
Yeah.
Tylenol makes it worse because of its effect on that folate receptor that the body's immune system is attacking. So there's an argument that autoimmune is part of this autism explosion. So, oh my gosh.
I mean, as you know, more and more of our health is going to the gut biome.
Yeah.
And we know vaccines are wrecking
that too. Yeah.
So there's so many different reasons it would be the case. But so the conclusion of his study, a guy that said to me over and over, even says while the cameras are rolling. I mean, I'm saying a lot is like, that I am pro-vaccine. Okay. I cannot explain these numbers, but the conclusion of this paper is you are 2.5 times more likely to develop chronic disease if you're vaccinated compared to those that aren't vaccinated. And the really mind-blowing chart that's in it shows over the course of 10 years, it sort of projects out, because most of these kids were like 4 or 5 years old that were in the study. If it projects out at 10 years, it showed that 57% of the children who got one vaccine or more would have a chronic disease, where only 17% would have chronic disease if they weren't vaccinated. So, it's just, and so here's what I think is so important about it. As I said before, 5 other studies, some people will even say 10 studies, depending on how you define a vaccinated versus an unvaccinated study. But this is the first time that I know of that a major medical institution that does research science like this for a living, that states how pro-vaccine it is. The lead author tells me over and over again, I'm pro-vaccine. So this is the first time this study's been done to prove us wrong. And instead, I think it's the most damning study we've ever seen for the vaccinated. And like I said, if it stood all by itself, you go, well, maybe it's an anomaly. Maybe it's it's about 19,000 kids in the study. Maybe these 19,000 in Michigan are different than the rest of the world. You could say that, but it's the fact that this isn't the first one. It's the 5th one.
I know.
And every time this study's done, it's what we now, I think, can refer to as reproducible science.
Yeah, just the
and
same
it doesn't
stats.
matter if you hate vaccines and do the study,
same
or
numbers.
you love vaccines and do the study.
Science.
We're seeing that's science.
But people say, hey, I follow the science.
Right.
Do you?
You cannot do better science than that. And so Henry Ford is saying the study was not a good study. It's not good data. And that's their.
Whoa, but you asked him. You asked the man himself. You said, is there anything you would do different about the study? Do you believe this is a great study? His answer?
He says, I don't know how you could do this study any better. Mm-hmm. It's a good study. It's an important study. Multiple times. You'll see
you
give him
that.
every opportunity.
Because you knew that they would come around and try to say that.
I assume this is what they're going. And he says it.
Yeah.
He says the only reason I'm not publishing this is it will be the end of my career.
He said
I will
that.
be finished.
Yeah.
It's like, Del, if I publish it, it'll be pointless. They're just going to come out. They're going to say it's not a good study. They're going to attack me, and I'm tired of being attacked. I don't want to be attacked on this. I'm not, and at one point even says I'm not a good person. I'm not one of those people that's a hero.
I'm not good under fire. Right? You know, he said, and then you hit him at the right blow, if you will. You said, yeah, but think about all of the kids. Think about all the kids that are getting hurt by this. And he said, and this was such a weak point, but this is what he's hanging his hat on. He said, yeah, but even if we publish it, nothing's going to change anyway. That was his justification.
The politics won't change.
Nothing will change. So why should I ruin my career? He's basically saying,
right.
Because even if I publish it, I'll go down, but nothing will change.
How many, and it makes you ask the question, how many other Dr. Zervoses have ever looked at this science thinking they were going to get it right and then just shuffled it under the bed and said, let's just let Sanjay Gupta keep telling everybody vaccines are perfectly safe. Let's lie to every pediatrician and let them believe they're doing the right thing because they believe they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I know.
You know?
Right, of course.
And let's let them every time they have another patient, because like 1 in 30 of their patients, their kids are autistic. They'll go, oh, it's normal. That was going to happen anyway. Let's let them keep saying that. Why? And when they have asthma and eczema and psoriasis and lupus and Crohn's disease and multiple sclerosis, I mean, our kids are so sick.
It's unbelievable, right? I mean, it is.
And to think that the very people that are trying to make them healthier are actually the ones making them sick and they don't even know. And I'm talking about the pediatricians.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and we would argue that the pediatricians, the doctors really have good hearts in it. So why can't they truly look at the science, Del? Why can't they look at this and see it for what it is? Why are they so emotionally bound up over here? Why?
Well, first of all, up until this moment, there is no science. There's no studies to go look at. This mountain of evidence, I've proven that too.
So now we have it.
Now we have it. And so they are. I mean, look, I think COVID was the first time. I think
it opened some eyes.
It opened, 30% of mainstream doctors did not get the COVID vaccine. I remember they were asked on the stand, the head of CDC during COVID, how many of your staff have gotten the COVID vaccine? They're like, I don't know, like 50%. Like 50%, they go to the FDA, and the FDA is like, yeah, about the same. Like the people that were in the know was like, I'm not taking that dang thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And I think that, watching that, and the amount of doctors that watch them say that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine could be dangerous, therefore it shouldn't be used. We don't have anything else that works, and we don't care how many doctors are saying this works. This could be dangerous. And every doctor on the planet knows, like, the safest drugs in existence, at the top of the list is both hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin.
Crazy,
so there were things like that, like I said, where they were like, that's not true. Wait a minute, that's not true. So there is an awakening happening. And then I think all the doctors that recommended the COVID vaccine to protect your family member, to protect your grandparents, and then only to find out, later on, they always knew it couldn't stop transmission, that wasn't even true. Yeah. And that myocarditis and swelling of the heart is more prevalent in boys than the disease itself. All of it. So,
turbo cancer.
Look, I feel bad for doctors. Their world is crashing down. Yeah. They were never taught. They're not scientists. Remember, your doctor doesn't go and do studies. They don't read studies. They don't go out of the way to read studies. They're assuming that what's coming down from on high, if the CDC says it must be true, which is why I call it. And I saw you had my lawyer's book out there, Vaccines, Amen.
I was going to hold that up because he was in the film.
Yeah, he's in the film.
I forgot to bring that
but
in.
it's really become much more like a religion or a cult than a science. A science wants to be challenged. A science is all about the scientific method demands that anyone that has a complaint or a theory that can, or a hypothesis that can undo the standing opinion or perspective is like invited to the front of the table.
Yeah.
Sort of like Charlie Kirk. I don't want everyone agreeing with me. I want the one that disagrees with me. That's what science is supposed to do. When it starts saying you're not allowed to ask a question this science is settled forever, and it's safe and effective, and that's it. And if you question me as a pediatrician, get out of my practice. I don't want to see your kids anymore.
Well, people have to understand, though, that pediatricians, the system's rigged here. They get bonused for the vaccines. They get punished if they don't vaccinate a certain percentage of their audience. People need to know this, right? So there's a lot of pressure on them because this vaccine thing, this is Big Pharma's cash cow. So because they're making so much money, you're going to get that response. Yeah. We don't want questioned. We don't want you to look at this. These people are just whack jobs, and this is anti-science, but it's not. Everyone listening, you need to get your doctors, your pediatrician to watch this film.
Yeah, it's a lot of doctors are reaching out to me and saying,
inconvenience study, and inconveniencestudy.com. Yeah. Because if I believe that any doctor with a good heart is going to watch this and go, oh crap.
Yeah. I think so.
I got it wrong.
I think
and that's okay. You got it wrong. I got it wrong a few times in my life too.
We all have to recalibrate. And look, we don't know what we got wrong. I mean, this is only the beginning. This is the beginning of a very important signal, as they say it. Let me be clear. A retrospective study. This doesn't have the beauty of a controlled study where you selected the individuals. You select your placebo group, your control. You try to match them up perfectly so you can have really good data. A retrospective study is not of that caliber. Everyone knows it. But if you've skipped the gold standard placebo study and now you say it's unethical to do it,
you have to rely on this.
The gold standard study is now the retrospective study. That's just the way it goes. You can point out flaws that, there was more African American kids in this group than in that group, or there was more premature births. Let's look at all that. And that is what's happening. There's a huge debate right now on, what issues could you not necessarily control for in this study. But
remember, though, he looked at that. He balanced it.
He did.
So it wasn't like he just no, he made sure it was as balanced as it could possibly be.
Because you obviously have to imagine he's seeing things he doesn't like.
This guy does
so
this
he's
for a
like,
living.
well, is it because we didn't,
right? Is there
we had a shorter follow-up time or unvaccinated kids go to the doctors less, and they did these side tests on it, which they write about too, and it doesn't change the numbers. And this thing's being debated internationally, but there's a great scientist named Peter Gutcha, who was one of the founders of Cochrane. It's originally called the Cochrane Collaboration.
Yeah, Cochrane Collaboration.
The world-renowned scientists around the world just thought science has gone to hell. Mm-hmm. We know you can't reproduce the science. At least 50% of it's being published in medical journals. So they established the Cochrane science. Yeah. This is what it would have to be called a Cochrane study.
They look, if there's 3,000 studies, they look at the 3,000, they'll narrow it down to
these are the only ones you can trust.
These 20 are fit our standard.
The rest should be burned.
Yeah, exactly.
The rest are
and then they make an opinion based
here.
On these 10,
Correct.
20 studies.
So even Peter Gutcha weighed in on the Henry Ford study. It was amazing when it popped up in my feed on X. And he essentially said, I saw Henry Ford's complaint, but confounding issues does not explain this result. It's so huge. The difference is so huge. You can't say, well, the African Americans, that didn't make up a big enough part of the control groups.
Take them out. It doesn't
change
out.
it.
Yeah.
And as he said, and by the way, I've tried to get him to look at the childhood vaccine program before, and people like them. They're like, it's ridiculous. It's the greatest invention of the 20th century. Vaccines have saved millions and millions of lives. He's now saying, based on this Henry Ford study, and the fact that there's other studies that are now seeing this same result, we have got to take a fresh look at the vaccine program. We need to do larger studies like this with the biggest databases in the world now. And that's what needs to happen.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying you see this study and go, oh my God, take every vaccine away. I'm saying do this study at a much larger scale. If the CDC does this study now with, I don't know how many millions of kids in America, and you get the same result, then we really have a problem. And then we got to drill down. Is it just maybe a couple of these vaccines that are really super bad, but you never tested them, so we don't know. And now you're taking them all at one time. So how do you parse out? How do you separate the bad ones from the good ones? So much work that needs to be done.
Well, we can look at the way other countries do it, because a lot of countries don't stack them like we do it. Then look at, and then we can obviously compare our country, their country. There's multiple ways of doing. Now with Bobby at the helm, I believe that the CDC could really actually pull this off and have a desire to pull this off. Listen, all Bobby ever wanted was that we do double-blind placebo studies, right? So I want to hear your opinion. Do you think that's going to happen? And the second thing is a drug company could be sued if there's injury and proven injury in a court of law, and it's the only drug that isn't that way. So he wants to change those two things.
Think about that this is the only product where you can't sue the manufacturer.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It also happens to be the only product that they allow you to not do safety studies on.
Oh, and by the way,
those two things together are so terrifying.
If you do a safety study, I heard that it actually makes them more liable. Right. Because now there's actually something that...
if they hide something they know about, they're in trouble. So they're better off to just not look for anything.
Right. It's
right?
What?
And then on top of that, so it's the only product that you can't sue for, the only product that doesn't do a safety study. Oh, and by the way, it's the only product you don't even have to pay for advertising because the government makes you take
Cash
it.
cow.
I mean, the whole thing is just really...
Big Pharma is built on it.
Really,
think about that, folks.
It's so shocking. And so, but I would say this, and it's one of the things I try to end with in the movie. There is a silver lining to all of this. There is this group of children in every time they do this study that are like thriving, that are just these brilliant beings of light with, in many cases, 0 in categories, which was one of the shocking things. They couldn't even come up with the statistic because there'd be hundreds in the vaccinated, but like 0 in the unvaccinated, which means you at least need 1 to be able to do some math. But 0, like I think 6 or 7 columns of serious issues where the unvaccinated aren't having any of it.
No.
And so that, I think, is what, while you wait to see if science rights the ship, if it can come to terms with itself and admit, like, why? I mean, obviously they haven't published a study like this before. In the decades, you know that they've been doing it, can't get it to work right. So they haven't told you we have a problem, and we know we have a problem. We're hiding the fact that every time we compare vaccinated to unvaccinated, the vaccinated are sicker. Well, now the cat's out of the bag. And now it's out. You know, can science right its ship? Can it admit it was wrong? Can our government say, oops, sorry for forcing you to take that COVID vaccine to have your job. Sorry you're having heart attacks now. Sorry about the blood clots. Sorry about the rise in cancer, which more and more we're seeing all the contamination of COVID vaccine. Oh, by the way, I guess you're going to be able to sue us because we lied to you. Do you realize how expensive? I mean, this thing is so big now.
So big.
It's so big. Millions and millions of people that are now sick because they did what their government told them to do. So there's not an incentive for the government. It's going to stick with denial as long as it can. Yes, Bobby is trying to get through the red tape. He's trying to get the 50,000 people that are part of this corrupted system to do these studies, a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. If he has enough time, it's going to take time.
I know.
I believe he's going to do it. It's why I really feel good about this movie is I want people to know why that study is so important. Yeah. That he's not just in there monkeying around. And by the way, he's not going to take a bunch of, anti-vaxxers and say, run this study. And I've just shown him, which I told him when I was running his, I was his director of communications when he ran for president. Bobby, get the most pro-vaccine scientists involved to write the protocol for that study. So when it does come out, they don't go, well, I mean, look at the scientists you used. Right. So Henry Ford proves you can get the most biased scientists in the world on the side of vaccines. This study, I think, is going to keep coming out the same way. And so
it will.
Lastly, to parents that are making that choice, maybe they're pregnant at home right now, all I can say is watch this film.
Oh, please share this.
I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you have a huge decision to make.
But people still have a decision, Del. And you talked about that group, the Good News group. My kids are in that Good News group, Good Health. They don't have any of the problems that their other kids have, all the autoimmune, the allergy. They don't have any of that. It's like, but that's still a choice. But people still will say, well, I have to do it because I have to do it. It's mandated. I can't get my kid. No.
Well, then they need to donate to my nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network. Go to ICanDecide.org or the weekly talk show, thehighwire.com. We fought and won back the religious exemption in Mississippi, the right to opt out of the vaccine program. Mississippi didn't have it since the 1970s. Took us 3 years in court. We won back that right. We are about to pull that off. We need funding right now because we're fighting the same case in West Virginia. I think it really looks good that we're going to win and give you the right to opt out of the vaccine program, which means there will only be 4 states left after that.
Wow. Did
California,
you hear that?
New York,
just so happens the highest autism rates. Okay.
Yeah, and
California,
the highest rates, right.
New York,
Connecticut, and Maine.
All the other states you can opt out.
All the other states you can opt out.
Did you hear that? You still have a choice for your kids to be in that
your
group.
Your school won't tell you, but you just go online.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to NVIC is a great website resource. Tells you where you get that information, and you can opt out.
Yeah, opt out. And what was your site again?
I can decide. You're allowed to decide. I can decide.org.
Yeah.
And right at the top of the page, you can donate.
Well, you were a big part of MAHA, still are in some respects, right? But you're not running MAHA anymore.
I was CEO. I launched MAHA Action.
Yeah, you did.
I launched the Super PAC MAHA Alliance.
I'm still a big part of MAHA.
Great.
I believe so strongly. And Bobby, he's a good friend of yours. He's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
But so what are you doing now with it? Why stepping out? You had a lot. This film was maybe a part of that. What?
Yeah, look, it was a long road with Bobby. I was by his side for nearly 3 years as director of communications. I launched the MAHA PAC so that I could run ads at the very end there when he joined President Trump. We had a lot of liberal and independents that were supporting Bobby, and I wanted to convince them that Donald Trump was our way forward. So I wrote and made ads especially for that. So that launched MAHA, and then MAHA Action, the C4, to the outreach group to really help build that movement. I was deeply involved in that. But the truth is that, Bobby inside of the government has got to dance. He's got to dance, right? He's on a high wire, literally himself.
Yep.
And so he has to do things that I don't always agree with. He's made some statements about measles vaccine that I think it's kind of like do or die, and he's trying to survive as long as he can to get the work he needs to done. He came out in favor of Ozempic this week. I hate
Ozempic, dude. I've done so many shows on
I hate that stuff.
I think it's poison. I think the whole thing's going to blow up. I know it is.
I know. But look,
it's.
I've been around him long enough to see. I know how he reasoned that, and I get the reasoning on it. But as part of MAHA, I had to champion all of the thoughts. It was really about supporting Bobby in many ways. And I love all the stuff in food. I love what he's doing, Tylenol and vaccines. But I felt like this isn't natural for me. I'm a truth. I call it like I see it. And I found myself not tweeting out about something I disagreed with, or, I was like, this isn't me. And I even said to Bobby, I'm going to step back to ICANN, the high wire. I actually think I'm of better value to you when I can call you out when things aren't going right, so that people know I'm sincere when I am supporting.
You're just not, Bobby's built for that from the time he was a kid on.
Yes, he is. I'm not built for it. Yeah. I would suck at that job. Dude, I'd be fired so quickly.
You would just
I'd be fired so quickly.
You're like my wife. It's just it's brain mouth because you believe it, and that's what makes you so you, right? Yeah. And it's but that's not great in politics, right?
No, it's not.
It's you're not watering it down, and you're going to say it strong and hard, and but that's what makes you great. That's what makes Highwire great. That's what makes and I think it was smart. I think the little bit of separation there. I think it will do Bobby's mission better. I think it will do this mission better.
Yeah.
And
by the he gets it, right?
Yeah.
He knows.
Yeah. Oh no,
he knows we're pissed off when he has to say whatever. He's like, just hang in there.
Yeah, he knows.
I'm working it. I'm working it. And I like to tell people, look, just because I'm frustrated with, this week we'll probably talk about Ozempic on the show. But I'll still say, here's the reasoning I'm sure he's had. I know how he reasons things. But here's the other things he's doing to just keep this movement focused, right? We have a way of turning on ourselves, getting frustrated. This is a huge, huge deal that he's there. It's an absolute miracle.
Yeah, it's a miracle.
That he's there.
It was God put
and
him there.
Already he's achieved more than every HHS secretary combined in my lifetime. But we're still waiting for the big one, the vax versus unvaccinated study. But that's why it's important to get this film to everybody. So when this conversation becomes more public, when we start hearing that they're getting closer, this study's coming, that you know how to talk about it, you know how to explain it, you know how to enroll people and saying, hey, we should all want this study. This isn't trying to take things away. This is trying to find out why our kids are so sick. And making this move is different than Vaxxed. Vaxxed, I had to show you movies about autism because it was rare. In this, it's
Everyone
probably in
knows.
your house.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, at 1 in 2 kids or worse, one of your kids has got eczema. One of them has asthma.
Who
One
are
of them has
these
these issues.
people that get upset at you or us or Bobby, anti-vaxxers? Who are they?
You know, I was in an interview that felt a little bit like a setup the other day. They were like, oh no, we're Maha. And then all of a sudden they're like, you're going to take my vaccine away. I was like, whoa, hold on a second. Okay. This is a different interview than I was expecting, but I love interviews like this. I'm not taking any vaccines away.
You can handle yourself.
I'm not taking them away. And neither is Bobby. You can't conflate my desire to, first of all, know the safety profile of them. And second of all, to be able to say, I want informed consent. You already have a list of side effects that are wrapped around every vaccine that the doctor is not telling the patients about. They have to do it with drugs. I don't think it's right that they're not doing it with vaccines. It's that simple. Once you're informed, she's like, my kids are perfectly healthy. I want to keep getting vaccines. I said, look, I'll take it a step further. If you love vaccines, I'll fight for your freedom to give your kids vaccines. I am all about your constitutional rights. It's a free country.
Absolutely.
You raise your kids the way you see fit. I'll raise my kids the way I see fit.
That's
I'll
America.
read the science I want to read. You read the science you want to read. But let's leave each other alone because we're all going to come up with different answers, and our diversity is what makes us great. But I'll take it a step further, I said to her. So I'm so not going to take your vaccines away that if you really want a vaccine, bring it over here and I'll stick that thing in your ass for you.
Yeah.
Like I don't like, it's not, this isn't about how, I'm not trying to run your life. What I'm saying is this thing is way overstepped its bounds. It's the only product that is forced on us.
Yes, but it's the COVID argument. But your kids, non-vaccinated kids, are a threat to my kids. That's the straw man that they set up and make you perhaps feel guilty. That's what they say.
That's what they try to say.
That's what they try to say.
I remember when my high school principal wouldn't let me in, and my mom was saying, she would always bring me to little battles, kind of who I am. My mom loved to say, this is what you're going to have to do when you grow up. And I remember the principal saying, you have to be vaccinated to be in this school. My mom said, no, you don't. Colorado has a religious and a personal belief exemption. He's like, but everyone else is vaccinated. She's like, look, do you believe in vaccines? He's like, yeah. You believe they work? Yes. And every kid's already gotten one here? Yes. All right, then what is my kid? How can my kid put them at risk if they work? He's like,
man, think of that. That's where that straw man doesn't hold up, right? Because that's the reality. If your vaccines work, we want people to have the choice. That's the point, right? It's like, if you talk about things, if we're able to debate things, it will get further to truth, and then we can make a choice based on the truth. Unvaccinated kids are not a threat to vaccinated kids.
No,
Bottom line, COVID was a lie there, and every vaccine.
By the way, they're the strong. The reason we have herd immunity is not because of the vaccine program; it's the baby boomers. I mean, I could do a whole topic on that, but we're about to lose the only generation that still has true herd immunity. They don't need boosted. They have lifelong immunity because they had all of these childhood illnesses, and they have been a foundation keeping us protected. Now vaccines are wearing off, even measles vaccine. They want to give 2 or 3 more now that you're an adult because they just don't last. And then, they just don't work.
But then here's the problem is as an adult gets, the chicken pox virus, the adult gets and then it becomes a deadly argument because they say, well, look, see, this is what we're trying to protect against. Look at all these people that are sick.
Yeah.
Because they don't have natural immunity. That's why.
It's true.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Man, this is an emotional topic, but, people need to hear this. People need to hear the truth. That's why, I want thank you for coming on because and listen, everybody needs, if you have a social media following, please put the link. It's free. It's aninconveniencestudy.com.
That's it.
That's it. And it's free.
Right there.
They can share it with everyone everybody. And people that believe in vaccines, don't believe in vaccines, watch it. It doesn't matter.
Just say, hey,
let's dig into the science.
Let's have a debate. Let's go out and grab a beer and let's debate this thing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a very, very interesting topic. And if you're afraid to even mention it, that should make you even more inspired. There should be no topic in a country like the United States of America where we're afraid to speak a truth, where we're afraid to have a debate. If we give up on having that debate, then we have let go of the dream of this nation. This nation demands that we be vigilant. It allows that every human being and every industry is capable of making mistakes, and we right our mistakes. You cannot fix a mistake if you're not allowed to talk about it.
Charlie lost his life for it.
Yeah. And, absolutely. He was a good friend. I got to work closely with him near the end of the campaign. And I know he would do it all over again. I mean, look at the impact telling the truth has had. I mean, Charlie's lived 1,000 lives.
Yeah.
Most of us that live in closets.
He's going to change more. I hate to say it, but he's going to change more lives now than he would before. And God had purpose in it and allowed it for that very reason.
Yeah.
Because, man, he's coming against the enemy. He's ushering in the greatest revival, especially in young people, in human history. That's the reality. So the enemy will not win on this topic either.
This is a very exciting time to be alive. And we took our eye off the ball. We let corruption take over in all parts of our government, in all parts of our lives. And, what I would say to everyone out there is, I remember when I was sitting in history classes and you'd read about George Washington, about the, cross a freezing cold river, and half of his crew have got, gangrene or smallpox. Yeah. And he's like, if we can get across this river and we can defeat this army here tonight, we will shift the course of this war. And imagine, I remember being like a little bit envious, like there'll be nothing in my lifetime that will be like the founding of a nation, or you know what I mean? It's almost like we missed that exciting moment to be alive. And then this happened. And then COVID happened, where everything those founding fathers fought for almost disappeared overnight. And they are now trying to censor us. They're censoring all of Europe, England. They're arresting people for ex-posts just stating their opinion. The entire world is under assault by authoritarianism.
That's a red flag, man.
It's such a red flag, and it is slamming on the waves of our shores right now. And we are needed more than ever. And this country and this Constitution and what we represent has never been under a greater threat and so close to being destroyed and taken from us. We live in that moment. We live in this moment. And for everyone all around the world, because I know you're watching the show in Australia and New Zealand and Germany, it is time to rise up as the citizens of this world and stand up for body sovereignty. If I do not control what is injected into my body and the bodies of my children, I am definitely not a free citizen. I have no rights as a human being. I now share the same rights as farm animals. And that cannot be. Man. We cannot allow that to be.
We're fighting. It doesn't matter what side you're on. If we keep the ability to argue our points, we'll get to truth, further truth. It's when you take that ability away is when you end up in a communist society. And that's where we're headed, unless
we're really close.
Unless we stand up. Because we have to have the debate. We have to be able to have the debate, man. Yeah, the truth will come if we have the debate.
Yes.
But if take the debate away, then we're done, man.
Done.
Yeah, we're done.
And once you give up your freedom, you never get it back.
I have to say this, I've known him a long time, and he wasn't always the conservative he is now.
I wasn't.
But that's our point. Because
I was a diehard
Bobby,
liberal,
I remember I was at a dinner with you and Bobby, and I'm thinking to myself, y'all are conservatives, man. It's like, but y'all didn't want to admit that then.
No.
But because see, there was a time where it was so close, right? And you might have had social views, this view. It's like, but now, man, it's different.
It's different.
Yeah.
It's different.
It's different.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. You got to share it. You do. This is important. This is about freedom. This is about medical freedom. This is about our children. This is about the next generation. This is about everything that matters right here, right? It is as important as George Washington saying, man, if we can just fight a little longer, despite how we feel, it could change this country. And I believe that's a great analogy, man. So let's fight, but we got to fight together. So share every bit of that link right now, every bit of it, and inconvenientstudy.com. Share it.
Thank you.